Hey, this is Steve Domenico in the Room Podcast, episode 16, with my special guest, Tom Sotis in the house, who just wrote a book that was just released, available on Amazon.com.
It is.
The Way of the Tactics, a Manifesto of Invincibility for warriors, executives, and athletes. We're not only going to talk about the book, but we're going to talk about Tom's journey, how he got to writing this book, a lot of his adventures through the years from a child to now. He's also been all over the world several times, done thousands of seminars, and did you create the Amok system and Amok.global?
I did, yes.
So Tom, welcome to the show. Let me just make sure that this sounds good.
How's that? Everything coming through
We
all right?
sound pretty good right now.
Everything all right?
Nothing is skipping yet. So we've had some technical difficulties. I think the coronavirus has jumped into my room, not infecting us, infected the computer system. Last podcast was a little choppy. So if at any time we start cutting in and out, let me know, and then I will stop the feed on another component and we'll carry on. So Tom, welcome to the show. Been dying to have you on. Sean Schubert is a great friend of mine. He talks very highly of you. I've been to one of your seminars, your Amok seminars. Had the fun of my life there. I've taken JKD. I've taken some lessons in the past, knife fighting, stick fighting. But I've never engaged with so many people, so many different, levels, and had so much fun doing it. So let's first talk about the Amok system and how you came up with that, and then we'll go with the book and some of your stories on growing up. So let's go with this Amok. Let's talk about what it's all about.
Well, first, Steve, let me thank you for having me on your show. I've seen a whole bunch of them. I really enjoy it. Schubert put us together, excellent.
Yeah.
Jim Gillette, some of those guys.
Yes.
We all know a lot of the same folks. But Amok, how did I start with Amok? I really wanted to learn knife work, and not because I ever really wanted to get good at a certain martial art, but because I needed it to work. So, I went to the Philippines a bunch of times and trained there. I met Dave Gould, who turned out to be the best teacher I ever had for knife work, and he was an American, so I went all the way to the Philippines to meet an American. And Dave really put me on the path of self-discovery, because I was really on my own path. And Dave was great because he offered me the principles that I really needed to be able to follow if I was willing to do the work. And the first principle, of course, was you got to start with true attack, or all learning that follows is false. And you learn that very painfully from Dave right off the bat. What that really impressed upon me was that if you can't make it work here right now and you're not functional with that, then it's not yours and your life is at stake. And so that became the yardstick of measure that I wanted to platform from. So based on a lot of the principles that I learned from Guru Dave, I was able to begin to construct this. And what I found in most of the methods that I had trained is it was the equivalent of learning basketball footwork, football plays to play a soccer game. That somehow the training didn't match the drills and the drills didn't match the fighting, that there seemed to be a disconnect between those major activities. And that was a little bit of a problem for me when I really began looking at sports science and how a lot of other things were put together. I mean, if you're a soccer coach, wouldn't you want to have soccer plays with soccer footwork? So pretty much that's kind of what we did after studying several systems in the Philippines and here, is I shelved it all and said, let's just fight. Let's just play the game. And as we started to really fight a lot, we started to learn to attack really well. Really well. We could
Find
attack.
entries.
Right.
So, yeah.
And once the attacks got good, then we finally got better at dealing with those, the real counters in real time to those attacks. And then as we were attacking and knowing those counters were attacking, how do you go work with that? So the rock, paper, scissors began to appear. Okay, the tactics began to appear, the plays. So from the fight, the plays began to appear. And when you can see in the plays what you need to be able to do, you reconstruct those things in training to get better at doing them. And so the natural progression of Amok is to fight first and let that dictate then the practice and training that follows. Practice is about utilizing the most effective moves, where training is learning about the efficient movement. And those are two separate components that have to come together for functionality to occur. What I found in training was that so many of the drills were not done in real time. There was no spontaneity or authenticity to them. And because of that, there was a huge disconnect between those things that we were practicing and how we were supposed to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Amok, I said, let's do away with that. Why isn't the fighting environment the very environment within which we practice? If the game is water polo, just how good do you think we're going to get by practicing volleyball?
Yeah.
So I wanted to be sure that with Amok that we were always, quote unquote, in the water. That authenticity is important. That it should always be spontaneous and adaptive and attentive. And if those elements are not present, then I think that it's not likely what you're doing is going to translate into functional fighting skill when you're in that mindset. So this is a little bit about how Amok evolved, because we fought it out. And over time, the method, it's actually reverse of most arts. They teach you the moves and then you learn practice and you try to fight in the end and they're disconnected. Our method reverses that. You fight first, and based on that fighting, you then practice in the fighting environment and train in the fighting environment. And sometimes those things are modified, but again, those principles are that there is not a disconnect between those activities, that they are mutually supportive. And this is one of the main things that separates Amok's method of training from what the other guys are doing. Not that we have any moves they don't have. The body can only move so many ways. It's how we train that makes us vastly different than what the other guys are doing. And in fact, 180 degrees different.
So you're basically throwing them, not, I want to say into the fire right away. Like you're giving them life, like letting them experience the live act of doing this instead of training them. You're letting them feel it first, so then they can kind of adapt and learn as they, when you start teaching them, like, oh, all right, I know what I was kind of doing wrong there. Is that kind of how it is?
Well, exactly, because I believe that there are two approaches, and one is artificial acquisition, where a person feels like, well, the moves are out here, my teacher's going to show me the moves, and I somehow have to acquire them through doing lots of repetitions.
Yes.
And then there is the guided discovery, which is through experience. So instead, when somebody comes in for training, we would get up and start to fight right off. A lot of guys go, well, I don't know how to fight. And I go, okay, that's okay. It's built into your DNA. And then we move around. I stab them. They stab me back. And I said, you do know how to do it. And then I say, after this point, now that you know the game, it's about improving your performance. So as we would start to fight, I would then say to him, well, how were you trying to get me? He'd be like, well, what do you mean? I said, what'd you do? And he said, well, I did that how many times? Once. Oh, single. Or, oh, combo. Well, what else did you do? Oh, a fake or a grab. So we start to identify the tactics of fighting. A lot of guys talk about tactical fighting, and then they can't actually define the tactics and tell you what they are. In our first class, you learn singles, combos, fakes, and grabs, and attacking disarms. You learn how to do your jump backs and hold your grounds and grabs and disarms. So you learn all the tactics in the very first class. After that, well, then we can look at improving your performance for them. But then you never like, oh, I lost because I didn't know the moves.
Yeah.
So ours is a very experiential version. Let me tell you this, Steve. If you get in a fight on the street and you get hit by something really good,
yeah,
when you go back to the school, what's the first thing you work on?
Not getting hit like that.
You fix that thing. So why isn't that then the model by which we train, so that we come in and we fight and identify a weakness and then fix that? Because when I was in Los Angeles getting in an average of 2 or 3 fights a day doing the job I was doing, we were very adamant about when something happened saying, guys, let's put our heads together and fix this so it doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the best answers came from non-martial artists. So we were very solution-oriented, and that's what I brought into Amok, is it's a solution-oriented, because here's the thing, if you were invincible, would you really have to practice or train?
No.
So then why isn't training about exposing our vulnerabilities and then repairing them?
So you can become
invincible. And that leads to the method of the Manifesto.
Now, as far as Amok, it's it's not a like a workout. It's to learn how to engage in knife fight. It's basically learning how to protect yourself.
It is personal combat on all levels. So Amok, as we bring it to civilians, is about achieving a best possible outcome. That means tactically sound and legally defensible and socially responsible, whenever that is possible. Excuse me. But as a method, and a method of training and self-protection, if we look at the spectrum of threats, we have the average untrained person, we have a trained person, we have a Goliath or somebody a lot stronger, or multiple unarmed opponents. Or we're facing a stick, a knife, a pistol, or multiple armed opponents. So we really have a spectrum of 8 different types of threats for civilians. Training military guys is a lot easier. He's your enemy, he's trying to kill you, you kill him. With civilians, we have a wide spectrum. And if you look at that and say, well, we have empty hands, we have firearms, we have sticks and knives, and we have other self-defense implements. Where should we start? And the reason that I select knife is because it's the most logical place to start, and here's why. When you start with empty hands, that will give you an inherent advantage with enough training over the average untrained guy, but you won't have any inherent advantage over another trained fighter, okay, or against a Goliath or multiple armed opponents or against a weapon. So after all that training, it still doesn't cover a wide spectrum of threats. Now, that's not to say it's not important, but looking at the tactical spectrum, it's very narrow. On the other end of that is firearms. I love firearms. I'm an enthusiast. I train with them. And there are some situations in which only a firearm will suffice and no other instrument will replace that. But those situations are far and few in between as well when you consider the entire spectrum of threats. So when you look at that spectrum, the problem is neither of those things cover that spectrum with a good escalation of force. When you look at sticks and knives, well, because you can use it a little or you can use it a lot, it works across that entire spectrum, whether it's an untrained person if you have to, okay, or a trained person, or a Goliath or multiple against sticks and knives and even close quarters with pistols and so forth.
It neutralizes.
Right.
Yeah.
So then when you compare knife to stick, well, the thing about the knife is it's easier to carry. Okay, it's easier to conceal.
Yes.
Okay, it's easier to deploy in smaller spaces. Okay, and it's easier to utilize without strength and speed and power. So if you're not as strong, or you're in a confined space, okay, or you're already injured, you have a lot better chance of survival. And here's the other important thing. When you learn to use a short knife properly, you can substitute any other handheld instrument. So from that, I can put a stick in there, long or short, or a machete, or even a close quarters pistol that we use for a blunt instrument in addition to firing rounds in. That's a particular skill that I work with a lot of gun guys on how to exchange gun and knife in close quarters. So the good thing about learning knife is that it gives you that one set of blade-based actions so that you can fight with it without any instrument against any instrument. So you hear that phrase of one frame, one mind, all weapons. Well, Amok is that one framework that provides those platforms. And that's why when it comes to self-protection, we start with a knife, and then we put other implements in our hands and use them with the same moves. So you don't have to learn new techniques in order to use a new weapon.
Exactly. Now, when you're teaching the knife, what are some, how do you go about, like, Amok, you have different levels of people come in. You have beginners that come in and just want to experience it. And you have them going against, everyone goes against everybody in there. When I went, whether you're a beginner, advanced, everyone had a shot at everybody. It's humbling, and it's exciting too. It's a game that you're not going to get hurt at, but you realize you can get hurt at this if you don't, if it's real. Yeah. As far as what you teach and how you start the course with somebody new, what are the basics on how you start the course and what you tell these newbies coming in, or even the most experienced one, because they're always learning and learn new things from each seminar you have?
Well, what's really interesting is when we have a room full of mixed people, right from complete newbies up to people that have had a lot of training before, and then you throw them right in there and you say, well, okay, you're going to duel. Here's your fight. do this kind, do that, and do the other. And then you see some of the newbies doing real well, and some guys who had lots of training not doing as well as they had really thought they would. And because they are now in an open and free environment where people are moving as they would naturally, as you would encounter them out in the street right now.
Yes.
All right, so when you stay out there and both of you are fighting and trying to get each other, that's the guy you would meet on the street right now if you were fighting. So what you start seeing is the great leveling effect, that you might have all of this skill doing all these drills and flow drills, then you get up against somebody who's just moving and he's not doing anything like the way you practice, and that's the functional disconnect I talked about. There's a big disconnect between how people train and then how they actually fight.
It's not all about forms
right,
and stuff
and the
like
flow drills
Yeah,
in which
yeah.
all the distance and timing is taken
Yeah.
out, and then you hear all the double speak about flow and all the other crap that goes along with it. All right, but in the end, it destroys recognition skills, which is one of the greatest things that you need to be effective in fighting in a spontaneous environment. So when we put everybody in there, they start realizing, wow, anyone can get begotten.
Yeah.
And that is why in Amok we have
I
no,
got Sean Schubert a couple of times, let me tell you.
that's why we have no rank or title or any such thing like this in Amok, because what about when the new guy comes in on his first day, and if I get up there and spar with him and he gets me first, what am I going to say? You're gonna call me master?
Yeah, exactly.
And he's gonna be like,
exactly,
dude, I just killed you.
Exactly.
You know, and
exactly.
so it's really humbling, because one of the other good things that I got from Dave Gould is, I don't care what you ever did before and who you train with. You know what's important? What you can do right now. And not even what you could do yesterday or last month,
Yes.
right now. And that's a very important thing that we never lose sight of. Okay.
Now, a couple more things about the seminars. Do you do specific ones, like, do you do ones just for the more advanced ones? You'll do or is it usually one seminar, anyone comes to it? Or do you do special ones for the more experienced level fighters?
Sure. Well, when people first come in, they would learn the core skills, which is basically how do you move and fight so that you could injure or hurt somebody without getting hurt in return. All right, because if you can't do that, nothing else is going to avail itself. You're not going to be able to do traps and locks and disarms and takedowns and all of that other cool looking stuff unless you can damage him sufficiently and gain control over the moment to do that. So our core skills are all about learning to gain control in chaos and violence. And from there, now we can look at what are your options. Now we can look at what we would call the focus areas of disarms, or traps to disarms, or locks and takedowns, or adding in strikes, okay, or getting in for other things that we want to enter and control. So those are the areas that if somebody is functional, now they can get it. Because what's the point of teaching somebody disarms if they can't contain that chaos enough to make the disarm?
Exactly. They gotta
Because
get in. It isn't like,
right,
yeah,
that guy's
yeah,
not
take
going to
my
hand,
hand.
right. He's not
Yeah.
going to hand it
Yeah.
to you. So if somebody's like, "Well, you're going to diminish him,"
Yeah,
well, great.
yeah.
How are you going to diminish him? And if we can't get good enough of that, don't
Yes.
just show me a technique. So where is the skill in diminishment and control such that it sets up disarms or it sets up the takedowns? Otherwise, you're giving somebody a very false sense of security of thinking, "Well, I'm going to diminish this guy," and then, well, what do you mean you're going to diminish this guy? You haven't gotten good at that yet. So all of what you're doing is really based on an assumption, and the problem with assumptions is that you don't know you're making them.
until it's too late.
Well, therein lies the big assumption, because then later on, if you get up against somebody who then doesn't know the drill, what if somebody came in off the street and goes, "That looks like crap. Give me that knife. I want to fight with you. Come on, show me."
Yeah.
Right now, when you train, like I've taught seminars in 24 countries around the world. Okay, I've been through South Africa and Russia and so forth, and people will call you out. And if you can't get out there and prove it,
Yeah.
all right. And here's the deal: when people's lives are at stake, they have a right to know that it works. Right?
Exactly.
So I
Exactly.
always tell people, your life is at stake, so you should challenge the information, which means if you can't functionalize it, you should ask me about that so we can find out why.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because you need to know this works beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so if you want to say to me, "Hey, Tom, I want to come at you full on with that, and I want you to do it on me so that I can see how that works,"
Yeah.
I'll be happy to do it with
Yeah.
you. Because your life is at stake, and you deserve that. But if you say to me, "Pfft, you couldn't do that to me," well, no, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to challenge the information, it's another thing to challenge the man.
Exactly.
And I encourage you to challenge the information And if you want to challenge the man, well, that's okay too, because then we prove the information one way or another.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Right. It's just a question of.
And you speak about, you can get just someone off the street and you can think you know everything. You can get killed by mistake. I mean,
Right.
A lucky slice, you know what I mean? So it's all there. And you got to have that, what you're talking about, all them steps, and know that, you can go in there and do it.
And that's where the Manifesto of Invincibility comes into play, because there are so many elements that in training, well, you're dealing mainly with all the outer elements of your learning to merge your tactics, which are your intentions, with your actions, your technique, making sure they work.
No.
Well, but the thing is, with your tactics, you don't know really what tactics and moves you should be using unless that's driven by your strategies, and those are driven by your values. So when you get out in the real world, utilizing your skills isn't just the technique and doing your move. Why are you there? Who are you encountering? What situation are you in? And what is your objective? Because if you don't really fully understand your own motives and values, how those things have outlined your strategies, and if you haven't developed protocols in advance, you're probably selecting outcomes that are maybe not the best ones. And now, if your values are not aligned with your outcomes, you're not going to get a good outcome. And what if then your outcomes are not aligned with your tactics, and your tactics are not aligned with your techniques? So we see that we have this multi-layered person who's in an actual situation. And the 4 layers are their values, their strategies, their tactics, and the techniques. And mostly in training, you're only merging tactics and techniques, but you don't really know all of that's driving that.
Yes.
And so this is one of the important things that the manifesto talks about.
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions. You're talking about, all right, so we're learning the techniques, and but there's a lot that goes on as far as in the brain, and to be able to do these tactics, which you talked about, there's steps. You have to have a conscious mind of what you're doing, and who you're engaging with, and stuff like that.
You're absolutely right, Steve, and every fighter knows this. And every fighter has these things compartmentalized. But sometimes if you don't have all of your gears properly aligned and in place, what will happen is you will get less performance out of yourself than you could. Now, especially fighters, like when you're preparing for a fight and you're in the grueling stages of training and getting ready, and you have all the psychological weight of carrying that. A lot of people don't understand what kind of psychological weight and pressures come along with that. And for a person, especially during the loneliest and most difficult times of training, because when you're training, a lot of it's lonely and it's hard. Okay, and the real fight doesn't begin until the moment you want to quit and you must continue. And then you have to dig down, right? Well, dig down into what? What are we digging down into? What are our deepest motivations that are driving us to do that? If we can identify those, then it's easier for us to dig down and fill those reserves up. And it's easier to call on them later, especially when you're under pressure and you're in the fight.
That's interesting. You speak about when is the fight really starts when you want to give up the fight. When you want to give in, that's when the real fight is. So you're teaching, or that's part of one of your lessons, that's when you're learning the most right there. That's when the fight really starts, when you want to give up.
That's where the reserves are built, Steve, because you know how many people used to go, they'd see Muhammad Ali and go, oh, I'd get in that ring and get my ass kicked for $1 million. Well, of course, anyone would.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid to get that fight in the ring. You're getting paid because you endured what it took to get in that ring. All right? So when you're saying, well, the fight doesn't begin until the moment you quit. I mean, you want to quit, but you must continue.
Yes.
Up until then, it's an ass kicking. It's an exercise.
Yeah,
it's whatever.
Exactly. Do you think the mind twitches or it just absorbs more info when you're in that situation of vulnerability? Do you think that's when you learn more about yourself? And you're talking about that's when the fight starts. That's where you start getting stronger, when you can realize I have to battle through this. This fight that I don't want to be, you know what I mean?
But where that comes from is from the everyday training. All right. So this is what I'm talking about when you're alone and you're skipping the rope and you just want to stop and you just say, okay, I'm going to keep going. Or you work in the bag, or you're just at the point where you're exhausted and you think you're just going to throw up and you're tired, but you have another round you have to go. And every time you just say, I've had enough. I just want to fucking stop. And then you say no, and you don't, and you push through. Well, that's when you go, okay, now I'm operating on reserves. Now I'm on willpower. Now I'm building my reserves of willpower. And those start to stack up inside you so that when you get up there and you're in the fight and all of a sudden things are going tough and you got to dig down, well, that's what you're reaching up into is all those reserves that you built up in all of that training and all of that suffering. Those are the reserves that you dig down. And if you didn't train and you didn't in training, and if you gave in and you quit early, well, you don't have those reserves. And it comes time to dig down, and you know what you find? Loss. There won't be anything there. And so that's why, you know, when I look at trainers and I see that guy training for the fight, you know, I see him in the gym suffering and sweating him by himself, and I look at him and I go, that's the man that I recognize. I know he's suffering now. The fight, no matter what happens in the ring, that's not the suffering. Not in my opinion.
Awesome. So we'll get back to the book.
Okay.
But you spoke about all these places, you know, been around the world multiple times. I mean, I've read a few, you know, I started reading the book. I read probably about 30, 35 pages. The book starts off, there's 3 stages of the book.
Yes.
So the first stage, let's talk about that, because I started reading that. There's a lot of quotes that you put out there. And then you explain some of your thoughts on what the quotes mean, or on some of the advice you got from your parents, or, you know, people that you were involved with growing up. You have them little quotes or little stories about them quotes that were made. And I can't think of a bunch off the bat, but, you know, some were from your mom and stuff like that. So let's talk about what the first part of the book is getting people ready for.
Okay, thank you. The first part of the book is autobiographical, where they're mainly stories that I tell from my life, short stories. And the reason that I would share that story is because I learned some kind of a life lesson, something from that was important to me, that carried into my life, that ultimately had its reflection in the manifesto later. They were part of the things that I learned that I carried into finally finding out how to achieve invincibility, that it is achievable, and how. So some of those stories, you know, like when Kennedy was killed, and I was only 4 years old and the flag was halfway up, and, you know, I asked my dad, what was that all about, you know, and he said, well, when, you know, a really important man dies, they lower that to show respect. So I learned at a very young age that that flag, you know, my life lesson was that flag stands for something much greater than ourselves. And I understood that at the level a 4-year-old could, but every year as you get older, it holds more meaning. So there are a number of stories that are like that. Or
there was one that I related to personally when you talked about Russia. Me growing up, you're how old?
60.
I'm 50, 54, looking 45. I must say. You look great for your age.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you could kill me right now if you want. Growing up, I was scared to death of Russia because they had the bombs and they were a superpower. I didn't fear like villains and stuff. I feared a strong country harming the USA as a young child. I don't know where I got that. I think it was probably because that was when, you know, the USA against Russia, you know, there's a lot of who's the stronger country here. But I related to that because your mom, you know, you said that to your mom, like you asked her that question. Can you talk about that? Because later in your life, you ended up in Russia behind the wall after the wall came down, training their soldiers. So talk about your fear or what you were thinking as a child as far as Russia, and then just real quick about when you actually got to go there and you know how it changed your whole mindset. Because there was another quote that you said that your mother said that there's good people everywhere.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about that.
Well, when I was a kid, I really liked National Geographic magazine, and I remember one day I said to my mom how I wanted to see I wanted to see the world, and of course at that time at school we used to get the drills with a special alarm, and you'd sit under your desk and put your hand up, like the nuclear drills, like that was going to make us safe, and of course the propaganda then was all anti-Russia. It was during the height of the Cold War. They were the enemy, the Bay of Pigs, the whole 9 yards. So I remember saying, yeah, Mom, I want to see the whole world. And I said, well, except Russia, of course, because they're bad over there. And she said, no, son. She goes, listen, I want you to understand something. She said, if you went there, you'd probably just meet almost everybody would be like us. They're just working really hard trying to get through life and raise their kids and get through family, And she said, just governments, they are always going to fight, but don't mistake that for the people. And I said, but Mom, on TV. And then she said, well, that's another thing, son. You shouldn't believe much of what you hear on TV. So that was the lessons I learned about Russians and TV from my mom. And then after the wall came down, to go deep inside of Russia, 2 Jehovah's Witnesses went first. And then
threw them into the fire right away.
And then they were the
they
bravest.
Go knocking on the door.
They were the first ones to knock on the Russian door, no doubt. You got to give them that. You got to give them props for that, Because they believe in what they believe.
Exactly.
Enough to say, I'm going to go there and knock on the door.
Hey,
right?
If I convert this guy, man, it's history right there.
So in other words, you don't take that kind of a leap if you don't believe, right?
Exactly.
So the third guy who went was Dan Brule, the breathing master. And when he came back, I had somebody who had introduced me to him. And Dan said, well, you should go. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, get on a plane and go. And I said, how am I going to do that? I don't know anybody
I'm just
there.
Gonna fly over to Russia, a place I'm scared to death of.
Sure, I'm just going to fly behind the Iron Curtain and get off the plane.
Yeah, exactly.
So he said, well, give me your resume and I'll send it to a girl I know and she'll circulate it. And
Russian
I
spy,
said, are you kidding me? He said, no. He said, do you believe in what you're doing? And I said, yeah. He said, then what? And I looked right at him. I said, okay. And he was absolutely right. So I gave him my resume. He sent it to a girl he knew.
Now, when you gave it to him, did you expect? Was
it
just a shot in the dark?
I had no idea. Look, there's some guy that I met
Yeah.
who does breathing. I don't even know this guy. All right, I don't even know breathing
He could
yet.
swim underwater for a long time.
And what's really funny about that is he turned out to be a Navy rescue
is it?
diver.
Really?
Yes.
All right, so there you go.
But in the end, when I gave him the resume, apparently he had it translated and sent it over there. So a couple of weeks later, I got on a plane and I got to Moscow, and then I got to Ufa, and I got off standing in the bag and standing on the tarmac going, okay. I didn't think this through. What am I going to do now, right? But my grandfather came to America when he was like 12 years old with his cousin, and they had nobody, and they had to just get off the boat and make their way. And I thought, well, if he can, I can.
Well, I mean, that's plus learning, everything you are through this. I mean, that fear goes away. I mean, it's a little there, but at that point,
still,
you're in Soviet. The wall just.
And when you get off and you look around, and at the time things have changed, okay, but at the time there were only 2 colors. There was dismal and gray. Everything, and it was like there was no hotels, hardly any cars. Everything was it was communist Russia. And it was.
So that's an eerie feeling when you stand there,
and you realize, okay, I'm 5,000 miles from home, and I'm the first, American really that most of these people are ever going to see. And so I said, okay, here I am, and I just said, well, I'll just walk into the city and see what happens. And as I walked off the tarmac, this kid came up to me and he goes, "Are you Tom Sotis?" I'm like, yeah.
Was he wasn't holding like a sign at the airport or something?
No,
like
I was pretty recognizable, I guess.
You were the only guy in color.
Oh, and what a great young man. He turned out to be a lifelong friend. He grew up to be the vice president of the administration, and he wrote speeches for Putin, and I still talk to him and so forth. But I met him, and apparently that young lady circulated my resume, and so he said, pick a car, and there's some of the richest men in the city had sent their car, because I go, well, what's that for? He goes, where are you going to stay? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, you need a host. So I'm going to introduce you to some men. They've all offered to be your host, and you can choose one. So at the end of meeting a few men, I selected one to be my host, and that was a really good selection.
Let me interrupt. Was this like a traditional thing that Russian, if someone goes and meet, like,
No.
were they intrigued by your resume? Like, what?
Well, yeah,
drew,
because
is that what,
I mean,
alright.
like an American's going to come here.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? And a martial arts guy, because
Yeah.
I said I wanted to go to do martial research. So they were all like, well, who is this guy going to
Okay,
be?
cool.
So the guy that I selected to be my host, at the time, the government was really unstable, and it was fighting with control with the local mafia for a lot of control in the area at the time. And so the government had gone in league with a private security company with 2,700 men. And that guy was the guy who became my host. So he put me up, got me a nice flat, and the exchange was if I train them for a couple hours a day, he'll take care of all my stuff, and then I can do my research.
Well, there you go.
Well,
A little barter action there.
perfect, except on the third day of training, the Minister of Internal
Deal off.
the Minister of Internal Affairs.
It's Russia. It's Russia, Tom. What'd you expect?
On the third day, my interpreter's face is white as a ghost, and I'm like, "What's up?" And he's like, "The Minister of Internal Affairs is coming down here to interview you, and I have to translate."
Bring your knife.
So, and he basically said, "Well, you know, our Spetsnaz soldiers, they scouted your training, and they said you do things different, so they wanted to know if you'd be willing to come down to the compound and test it."
Test it, not show them. Test it. All right.
So I said, "Yeah, of course, sure, I'll come," you know. And so they said, "Okay, well, we'll pick you up tomorrow," you know. And I'm like, "Okay." And then as we left, I'm leaving there, and I'm realizing, oh, okay, this is it, you
I'm
know.
gonna fight 50 guys at once.
Well, I had no clue really, and that's why a boss said to me, he goes, "Well, you don't look too worried." I said, "Well, maybe not showing it." He goes, "Well, what do you think's going to happen tomorrow?" I said, "Well, at the very least, I'm going to get my ass seriously kicked."
I might not come
You
back,
know?
but the ass kicking
Well,
might be the best part.
And he said, "Well, why don't you look too worried?" I said, "I get my ass kicked really good." So, you know,
nice.
I knew, look, I
Yeah.
knew, you know, it's like I just have to earn their respect.
Yes.
All is it, you know. But what was really cool is the next morning when I came down from my flat, my interpreter was there, and as the chief from the Special Forces came to pick me up, here comes Dan Brule, the breathing guy. Do. "Hey, Tom, how are you?" And I'm like, "You're here." And he's like, "Yeah, what's up?" And I'm
I'm
like,
in the suite next door.
"Well, we're heading off to do some stuff." He goes, "Okay, I'll come along." And I said, "No, Dan, I don't think you should come. You know, probably I'm not coming back." And you know what he said? He goes, "You think in 100 years I would abandon another American if there's any danger?" He said, "No way." And he goes in and gets in the police car. And he sits like this. He goes, "I'm going."
Nice.
You know, breathing guy.
Was he a character kind of guy?
Well, I thought at the time, I'm like, this guy has to be a CIA player. Who else would volunteer for this?
Or
you
he's
know?
just crazy,
And
crazy.
And it turns out he's just an incredible man.
Yeah.
And he has an incredibly big heart. And he felt responsible for me being there, and he wasn't going to leave me alone. And he came with me, which was cool because now I have an American witness to the whole thing.
Oh, exactly. Right
you
there.
know. And but after that day, they asked me if I would stay behind and work with some of their teams. And so, you know, I got permission to do so, of course. And so I started going. I went back and forth quite a few times, and
Awesome.
became the first contractor to work there. And the guys there were great to me. All right, my mother was right.
And that's where there's good people everywhere. You just,
Right.
you know, there's bad people everywhere and there's good people everywhere.
'Cause
And you can't, you know, you got to find out for yourself, man. You can't just watch TV and let them tell you who's good and bad, you know.
Well,
So,
you know, the other thing from that is my grandmother told me once when I was a kid, and I was miffed because going to a karate tournament back then, they used to put all the juniors in one division, align you by height, didn't matter by rank, and then you'd fight.
oh,
And
so you could be fight. Oh,
Yeah, and
we call it sandbagging in jiu-jitsu.
So I said, you know, it's unfair. And my grandmother looked at me. She goes, "Do you have 2 hands and 2 feet?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, you have the same chances they do."
Exactly.
And so, you know, I remember even when I was in Russia, you know, and I was looking at them, and I wrote it in the book. I said, I was looking over at all these guys. And I was like, yeah, but some of them got really big hands.
Yeah,
you
they're
know?
big boys.
Yeah, but no, they were good men. All the men that I met were honorable men that treated me good and worked hard, and I made a lot of good friends there. And
Excellent. Before we move on to like the second phase of the book, did you have permission to, during your career, go to other countries and train other individuals? Like, do you still do that?
Yes.
Train like kind of special force people or
I work with a lot of
security.
I work with a lot of
things,
different groups at
all
a
right.
lot of levels. I work with
some you can't talk about.
Yeah,
All right.
I work with some intelligence groups. I
Okay.
work with special forces groups and so
Are
forth.
you bugged right now, Tom?
Yeah, as you would imagine that I do. You know, I work with law enforcement. You know, any of those higher end guys. You know, that's my thing. I'm the knife guy, and you know, especially in close quarters with knife and gun, we play that game quite a bit too. So, you know, I train the president's bodyguards. I've worked with you know, Secret Service and some of the other groups along the way, and you know.
And he's in Rhode Island, folks. He's right down the street from me.
We do the 3-letter guys and all that, but I have to say, I love doing that work, especially with those guys that have sacrificed so much to do it. But still, my favorite people to work with usually are still newbies. I still love doing seminars because I can give them so much in a short time, and you know, you see that learning, and to me that reward comes back. You know, and to me, as a teacher, I still connect with the everyday guy, so that's why
the emotion is more out of the newbies, and the, you know, and it glows to you. You know what I mean? It's like, and that's part of the reason why you teach. You like that's your reward when they're loving what you're teaching them and they're learning at the same time. That's why you do it.
Well, you know, people ask me all the time, and when they find out some of the other work that I do, they're like, well, you know, don't you love doing that? I'm like, sure. And they're like, well, how come you still do seminars? And when I tell them, because I still love it, they're kind of like, but why? They're all like beginners and they're new. And I'm like, but that's why. And sometimes they don't get it. But for me, I just love that.
And you're giving part of yourself to them. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a bond too when you're doing this these Amok seminars and stuff. I mean, they're trusting you with the knowledge that you're giving them. So there is a bond there, and you develop friendships, even though you may never not see these people again. You know in your heart that you're helping them. You know, they might not be the next, you know, Tom Sotis or anything, but you're making them better than they were yesterday.
To me, what could be more sacred than a person that says, my life could be on the line, can you help me? You know, to me, what gets down to it more than that? And that's why we don't have rank or title or any of those other things, and that's why I want to get right in there. And you know, I've had instructors that used to act like somehow like they had to cut off a piece of a finger to teach you a technique, and I'm like, well, why bother? If you're not going to open your heart, share generously, and help this person the best you can, then why are you even doing that? You should be doing something else, in my opinion.
I mean, you do these, I'm back on this Amok because I love. You don't need years and years of training to be able to, you know, defend yourself. I mean, one seminar might be able to do it. I mean, you teach functionality, which is big. It's not all forms. It's not like, here, take my hand and do that. It's functional on the street. It could save your life. It's not a game. You're teaching someone to survive.
I've always proceeded on what we call the rule of one. What if somebody says, hey, in about an hour from now, I have to like go get in a knife fight or something. What can you show me to survive? And then he comes back an hour later and he goes, I'm alive, but I have another one tomorrow. And then he comes back the next day and he goes, I'm still alive, but I have another one next week, and then next month, and then next year. So it doesn't mean that we don't see the longer arc.
Yes.
But we're very sure about making sure that we can maximize your functionality for whatever given interval of time you can invest. It's not like, okay, we're going to do all this foundation building time, and then years later, all of this is somehow going to come together for you. No, we've reversed that curve, and by reversing our methodology, we've turned that curve over completely.
Awesome.
And that is why we have such a high degree of functionality in a short time. And as well with a knife, look, with a knife you're good and then you get better.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you're starting at the bottom rung. I mean, almost anybody could be really good with a knife in a very short time when it comes to protecting themselves, so long as they match that with their will.
There you go.
Okay? Because I want to give people the skill to match their will in protecting themselves and their loved ones. How many people say, I would die for my kids? And I say, I believe you, and you probably would. And forgive me if I don't accept that as a noble sentiment that excuses you from your responsible training, because responsible is response able, not response willing. So if you're so willing to die for your children, why aren't you willing to train for their safety instead?
To be the best you can be,
right?
to protect them.
So I understand not everybody wants to train, but they don't then get to excuse themselves by acting like, well, I'm willing to die for my kids, as though that absolves you of that responsibility. It doesn't.
You need, if you're willing to die, what's that mean? Like, if
right.
You need to protect them. If you're going to die for them, if you're going to say that,
but almost
you're gonna take a step to learn how to defend them.
Almost all of the guys that are in Amok for any length of time, they're almost all family men, and they're almost all middle-aged. Most of the guys in Amok are between 35 and 55, because they're family men that go, you know what? If I need to defend myself and my family against a real attack, I need the tools to do that. I'm not going to get up and, and look, we're not talking about two guys that get in a bar fight. We're talking about people that are at a disadvantage, that are going to be attacked and otherwise victimized. Okay? How are you going to square that up? And people start seeing in a very short time, wow, I've got this and I can use this. And how many guys might think that they're going to come, and all of a sudden you go, really?
That's it.
You want to touch me?
Yes, exactly.
All right. And
that's a neutralizer to multiple attackers coming at you. Who wants to get stuck first or sliced first? Nobody. Nobody wants to take that first step unless you're a lunatic, and then that's when that training comes in, because then you have to use that skill because it's real at this point.
If they're going to push it forward, then you do have it, and at least you have the best possible chance of survival to do that. But here's the deal, and I even wrote about it in the book. I was chasing a shoplifter once. Okay, and the kid was fast, but I was fast too. And at one point, he hopped over the wall, and I hopped over the wall, and he was in a courtyard. He was trapped, and I stopped, and he stopped, and he looked at me, and I had him cold. And he whipped out a blade, and he said, if you touch me, I'll stab you. And he meant it. And I jumped back over that wall, and I said, he got away.
That jacket ain't worth it.
Well, the very fact is this. If that person standing across from you is not willing to risk their life, okay, to do something, then they will defer to that. If you have a blade, you're willing to kill someone to defend your life. If they're not willing to die for that, they will back off. And, I worked as a bounty hunter for a lot of years, so I was in a lot of places that are difficult to be in, and I'm not a real big guy. And so on more than one occasion, when I've had somebody push my button the wrong way, I'd look at him and say, look, I'm not going to fight with you because surely you will beat me up. But if you lay one finger on me, I'll kill you one way or another. And when you mean it and you have the ability to do it because you're not bluffing, because I think to myself, if this guy hits me even once, I'll stab him. You know what I mean? Because I'll do what I have to get out of here. And when he looks at you in the eye and realizes that you mean it,
he better kill you first.
Right. But then they start to realize, wait a minute, this guy has escalated and he's ready, so maybe I shouldn't pick on this guy. And when the average individual who is trained and they have their blade, and somebody comes up to them and thinks they're going to give them the business and realizes this person is going to defend themselves and they have the will and the skill to do that. Right. Well, that's why we talked about tactically sound and legally defensible, okay? Because we go through all of that. Right?
You can't just be whipping it out and going,
No. We have the pre-fight game, the fight game, the post-fight game, the legal game, the police game. All of that is built into the training, absolutely. Because we have a lot of law enforcement guys that train with us over the years because we've always been trying to do the right thing. My whole vision has always been...
And part of your training is, that psychological, that you need to know this is real if you're going to... you can't just be engaging with people unless it's a life or death situation.
Well, this is part of pre-examining our will when I said to you, okay, what is the Manifesto of Invincibility all about? Because when we look at our values, we know what our values are, and that's a much deeper conversation to talk about our values and motives. But once you know what those are, what we say at Amok is you need to learn to strategize, to pre-examine your will. And so what we suggest is to, in your own mind, start to imagine what are the different types of threats that you are most likely to face. And given those circumstances, what are the protocols of action that you believe that you should take? And in doing that, you imagine yourself, after it has resolved, you will be held accountable for your actions and you will be saying, Your Honor,
Yeah.
Okay, given the circumstances, this is what would happen, and this is what I did, and given those same circumstances, I would do that again. Now, if you think it through to its logical end before that happens, so that you understand and you're ready to accept the consequences of your actions, then you won't have to, in a moment of stress, have to say, well, if I do this, that'll happen. If I do that, that will happen. In other words, that's where that moment of hesitation comes in, because you haven't yet chosen the end game. Once you have an end game, well, then you have the strategy, your tactics, then you know what to do. So this is how come sometimes even very trained persons can hesitate in a moment, because they don't have their end game already. So if you pre-examine your will so that you know what you're willing to do and when you're willing to escalate and what levels you're willing to go
So
to.
there's no hesitation.
Right. And then when you're presented with a certain situation, the only thing that you have to do is then absorb the protocol to go right into it. And that's why protocols exist. So that when you're under stress, you don't make a bad judgment because you didn't have the time to think it through.
When people leave the Amok seminars, do you give them exercises to do or things to remember, like keep going over this, like to keep their mind fresh and to keep these steps, embedded in their brains, because you just don't want them to come to the seminar and forget everything. You want to have this go with them, and
it has to be embedded.
Yes.
Right. And that's why another thing about our approach is very different than the way most other people teach and train. So that it embeds this in them so that they can leave there and go, you know what, it's simple enough for me to understand that I can actually do these things and I can repeat them. But some of the things that do take a little bit more time to accumulate, that's where we have the Amok videos that are on there, so that people can say, well, yes, like $5 a month or something. So you have the whole reference to go, I don't have to worry about notes, or if I didn't get that drill right, I can go up there and check it out. And then they can shoot me an email, or we Skype or FaceTime, and they ask me questions.
And then you become that
and we straighten it
Amok
out.
family, and just like any other gym or any other coach you're kind of like a coach to multiples and multiples of people. Like, does your phone or messenger or whatever never stop? So do you have like 3 phones? Is there like do you have like a bat red phone or something?
No, because I don't like
Tom's special phone.
I actually don't like the phone.
Yeah.
I like email, and I don't mind some text, but I mostly like to stay on Facebook and Messenger for business because it allows me to keep everything there and work with it. With the phone, I'm not a real
that's
very
like
auditory guy.
Yeah, I'm like 3 words and I'm done. My girlfriend hates me. She likes to talk. I don't even talk to my kids. I text them, and they rarely text me back, so they hate the phone too.
Yeah, right.
So, second section of the book, we talked about life experiences and quotes and stuff. I'm going to be getting to the second section. I might finish the book by the end of the weekend. I'll have some time, but we're going into the second. What are we learning here before we get into the third? Because it's all steps to become invincible. Not only in fighting, in everything, because once this is embedded in your mind, it's going to make you a better person, more confident
and that's what the third part is.
All right,
understanding first what is the method, and then how then would you then apply that.
Now we want you to go get this book and read it. We don't want to give away everything here. We're just like giving you a little what are they? Notes,
right.
I don't remember because I didn't.
Well, look, my website is tomsotis.com, and if you go on there, the book is on there, and it gives you a preview of a whole bunch of the pages, so they can.
So say that again.
It's at tomsotis.com.
Oh, that's easy as I don't know if it's on the screen, but
Amok.global is the website where my knife stuff is, but Tom Sotis is my personal website, and that's where you can find out if I do my speaking and consulting and coaching for business and coaching for sports.
I'll add that on this video once we get it off. I'll put that in there so everyone can tap on it and go see it. But awesome. So all right, second phase of the book.
Second phase, the Manifesto of Invincibility.
So go ahead. So so what do we, in short, what are we at in the middle of the second part of the book? What are we learning, or what do we?
Years ago, I read a book called Legacies of the Sword, and it was about this Japanese sword system that's been around for 500 years, and they have a very detailed written record for 500 years of this. And they have outlined what they call Shinbu, which is how to achieve invincibility. And it was really esoteric and psychological, and I was fascinated with it, studied it for years, and pretty much figured it took me about 15 years to figure it out. And what I really came up with is the nuts and bolts of that. What does it take? What did they put together in a conceptual form there that they had in their training, but it's not released? It's like saying, I understand the principles of rocket science, but I don't know how to build a rocket. So I thought for that, well, okay, what is invincibility, and how could that even be? And the very thing is that invincibility does exist, but not sustained invincibility, like one person could beat everybody forever, but temporary invincibility. The idea that a person could be performing flawlessly and perfectly, okay? That's an invincible state. And we see it all the time. We see it in high-level sports. You see it in combat and soldiers, and you see it happen in survival situations when people are at the most extreme levels of performance. And so what is it that it takes to achieve that level on purpose? And how can we learn to achieve it and sustain it for moments at a time? So what we're looking at is temporary invincibility. What does it take to achieve that? And that's what the second portion of the book is about. And really there are 8 different gears that all need to be in place. The first one, the most underlying ones, are your underlying motives. Those then give way to your mindset, which opens up to your vision, your visual plane, and then what you're paying attention to your cues, the intention of what thoughts you're holding in your head. Then there's your breathing, because then that connects all of the internal to the physical action that follows, and then the recovery of your action. Okay, so we have motive, mindset, vision, attention, intention, breathing, the action, and its recovery. And all of those elements are what create perfect performance. And so as we begin to dissect and look at individually for ourselves each one of those gears and make sure that each one of those teeth are filed and they're all in there properly, then we can look at how much better we can perform. And it helps us to identify within ourselves areas within which that might have inhibited our performance that we were unaware of because we hadn't previously identified them.
Do you cover each one of these? Motive, mindset, like as far as examples in the...
I write about them in there,
all
yeah.
right.
So the one...
And there are, this is... It can't be, this is the set in motion here. Mind, motive, mindset, it's got to be in stages that way, right?
All of those are built in there. You'll
Yeah.
see that it's explained in there because that's part of when you say, well, we have values and then we have strategies and then we have tactics and techniques. So you'll see those areas built into the book. And in that area, you'll see one area of strategy that talks about pre-engagement. Those are all the things that you have to do right up before the moment of first contact that we had talked about a little bit. Some of those pre-examining your will and things are in there. But once you get to that moment of engagement itself, or the fight itself, that's when you have to have perfect performance. Okay? And that's right in that area when we talk about engagement. So it's very specific, and I write about each one, and then we talk about them. And then more of those things are broken down further in the book. So some of them are talked about on a more conceptual basis, and I'll be writing further books on some of the nuts and bolts on these. Okay.
So, to talk about how this book, we'll get to stage, the third part of the book, but you didn't intend to write the book, right? Or were you asked to write the book? Or like, how did you decide to write the book? Is this the first book you've written?
Yes.
How did you decide that you need a book, or you wanted to write a book? I mean, you should have wrote a book a long time ago, but how did you finally decide it's time to write a book?
Well, people have been telling me for years, you should write a book. And so for many years I've had the title, and the title was going to be The Incoherent Ramblings of a Brain-Damaged Street Fighter.
That's awesome.
And that way...
That's the second book.
Well, that way if you didn't like the contents, I kind of warned you in the title, and it would be your own fault.
Covering yourself.
So I was covered. But a couple of years ago, I got close with a friend of mine training a lot. His name is Glenn Chavis. And I've known Glenn for 25, 30 years. And as we were training together and getting further into this, and he was seeing where my mind was and then the methodology, he looked at me one day and he's like, dude,
You can write this shit down.
and he said, people need to hear this.
Yeah.
And he goes, because you have something here that's so much greater than for what you're using it for knifing, because this can be used for all kinds of sports and for business and this and that. I said, yeah, I just haven't built those bridges yet. He said, well, we're going to start building some bridges. And Glenn's a great guy, and he knows everybody on earth. And as soon as, he made a couple of moves and sent my method to a couple of people. Next thing I know, I'm with Von Miller at his Pass Rush Summit, and I'm working with the guys on the field and doing some things. And, that gave me a lot of motivation to go, wow, these guys want to step up, and they wanted to, and they followed up, and they wanted to learn more about my coaching. And so I started meeting people in business as well. Traders for Causes, when all the big stock traders get together in Las Vegas and they do an event which they help each other and a bunch of people, and they invited me to go speak, and I was really honored to be there. And I started meeting a lot of different people, and people started saying to me, do you have a book?
Yeah, you have a book. I can't come see you live.
And every time Glenn kept looking at me going, I keep telling you I need a book, so I scratched one out.
Excellent.
And I basically wanted to give people some idea about what were my experiences and how that brought me to writing the book to begin with, so that it would give some context to the Manifesto of Invincibility. So if you're like, well, okay, I'm reading this knife guy's book on how to become invincible, but how do I know who he is and what he's done and how did he get here? Because where did this come from if he, quote unquote, invented it?
Yeah.
And what I say is I didn't invent that. I discovered it. All right. And,
Yeah.
and the other guys discovered it too. And they told me it was there, but I had to dig it up for myself. All right. So, in terms of putting that together and building the method, this is where we're at.
Awesome.
And Bruce Lee, look, Bruce said to us, don't imitate, don't accumulate, but integrate. So, when you look at the Manifesto of Invincibility, it's a method of integrating skill. So whatever skill that you want, which is really the essence of what Jeet Kune Do was, right? Instead of going out and learning all the different versions of it, what is the method of integration? So when I get with those guys, I'm always interested to pick their brain and say, what is your method of integration? And to see what kind of ideas they have about integrating skill and to see where their head is at. And that's what I'm interested at when I talk with other fighters. I want to find how do they integrate skill. And these are some of the things that I find to be fascinating.
Awesome. Did you had to write many notes through your years and stuff? Or did you just, as is up here, did you ever write stuff down as far as like in your experience, like a journal or anything like that through, or you had to burn it because it's top secret?
No, over the years I've created manuals for the trainers and
Okay.
and the guys that are coming forward, and most of that information stayed in house, not because I was trying to keep secrets, but just because I'm not big on promoting or putting it out there. I don't advertise. I've never spent a nickel on advertisements. We don't do rank and title. We're just we've always just quietly done our thing, and so the manuals stayed with the guys. So I have a lot of the writing. Most of what's in the book was not really in the manuals because that's the nuts and bolts of that. But a lot of the ideas that were in there were covered, and they're things that I've discussed before. Some things I've written about. The stories, about 2 years ago, I started putting together some stories because there was some interest in maybe doing some speaking for the corporate world. Which is definitely on my agenda.
Excellent. Well,
I've
the
done
sky's the limit.
I've done some of that, and I want to do more of it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's just a lot of fun, and so part of the book is designed for that as well.
Well, yeah, like you talked about that. We get to the third.
Oh,
part of
right,
the book,
right.
Where you said it could be functional for not just fighters or any walk of life and a business and as family men too. I mean, it just, let's talk about that. Once you get through all these, does it take a special person to be able to
No,
Being
because
invincible.
no, because the thing is, the method can be learned separate from the knife work. And in fact, when I have the videos on my website, core skills, here's where your knife work. Methodology, if you want to understand the method and the theory behind that, you can go get the videos and study just that. And I have other guys around the world that are coaches in different things that study just the methodology and bring that back and apply it to something else. And they're using that methodology. So not only do they do that for sports, but then also in business. I have a guy who's been studying with me for many years, and he owns a contracting business he has a few hundred employees. And one day he invited me down to show me his new building. And he goes, I want to show you the Amok building. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, I redesigned this building and my whole business and our training, how we run everything around your Amok methodology. And he goes, and I've been implementing it for years, but I finally finished it. So he showed me how his building is designed and how the trucks come in, every little thing, even where the water's, everything about his building was for functionality. And then how they train people and how they take their goods in. He goes, the way that we used to receive our goods and where we would put them, how we would assemble them and put them out. He goes, we completely changed all that. He goes, and production's through the roof. And he goes, and everybody's like really happy, right?
It's
so
functional.
His business was getting more functional. So he even then said to me, hey, can you convert all of this into business terms? And I said, sure. So when I showed it to him, he said, great. Now he brings me into his company and I work with the executives and other people on his staff, and they're learning the methodology but utilizing the business terms, and it's just going great.
Unbelievable. So the third part is what you're talking about. So let's talk about a couple of little hints or whatever there. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about it because you have to get through.
Not really.
All right, so go ahead.
Well, the third portion of the book is called the application. So what would you do with this better improvement for yourself, this idea of what's in there? And the first thing that I talked about was being a disruptor in the industry that I came into as a martial artist when I wanted to do knife. I love martial arts, but I don't like what people do to it and with it. That said, I didn't like the functional disconnects. So the method was reversed. One of the other things I didn't like was the pyramid structure with students, instructors, masters, and Grand Poobah on the top, and everybody fighting for rank and title, and then it fractures and all the politics that goes along with it. So instead I took that pyramid and I inverted it and I made a funnel. And the funnel is for us, the instructors and myself, we're at the bottom. We got to help people get up through the core skills. Remember I said I like to work with the beginners?
Yeah, exactly.
To us, the core skills is like the stem on a funnel. And once you get through core skills, now you can get up in the focus areas and learn.
Cream is rising.
You can train for as long as you want. And by the way, if you want to step out and start your own pyramid or funnel, you don't have to rip off our house because there's no top to it. So you can step out. We're still going to be brothers. Randy Hodges from Thailand. He trained with me for 15 years before he moved there. 5 years later, I encouraged him. He started his own art. Yeah. Well, you know what? He's still a brother. We're still all together. Exactly. Our guys all train together, but he kind of does things his own way. So Amok is like raising kids. You want to You want to raise up and get out of the house.
They're keeping the structure the same, but they're adapting it to them kind of exactly how JKD or is
maybe
you take it with you, but I mean you keep the functionality there, but you can adapt it to certain.
And it's not lost in this idea of concepts where we just start hodgepodging everything in there and just call it concepts. No, there's a structure on how it builds through. But I mean as an organizational structure, so that when people come in, they don't go, okay, I've joined and now all of a sudden I've got this belt and I've got to get these belts and I got to stay in the organization and these guys are above me and they're below and I can only sell these forms or ranks and all the politics that comes with that. Ours was, hey, up and out, you've got your skills.
Well, you want them to grow. You're growing them.
I'm developing them.
Exactly.
And so the other thing is it fosters competition from within because it's limited. Ours fosters cooperation because they kind of need each other to gain skill and do this. So it's just a different approach. And I'm not saying there's something wrong with the other one. I'm saying a lot goes wrong with the other one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which you spoke about.
Right. And very rarely do you see it done right. So I'm not saying it's inherently wrong. I'm saying it doesn't usually work out well. So we flip that over. We want to be supporting our people, not containing them. And then we've reversed the method. And not only that, but when we teach, it's typically through the experience and then asking you questions through guided discovery Okay, you discover from within what these are and you identify them and then we work them out, which is different than us giving you that information. You're trying to absorb it by doing your drills. So we even took the approach and turned that inside out. So we're upside down, we're backwards, and we're inside out, and we're the best
But it's working.
And we're the best at what we do.
Yeah.
Okay, and I say that without reservation. There's a lot of great guys doing a lot of great things in the world. Okay, and I still learn from other people, and it's still and all of that.
Yeah.
But we are the best in the world at what we do in Amok. And then the other thing is that Amok is a company. It's not a martial arts organization. And it's professionally licensed, which means when you come in, there is a standard. Everybody meets the standard that you do this. It's done properly for licensing, and it stands up to external scrutiny. Imagine if you were a knife instructor, and you teach somebody, and then they get hurt, and then they bring you to court. And then they say, well, what kind of instruction did you get? Oh, well, I got certified on my weekend of training someone. Oh, really? So in other words, as soon as they start to expose that you're not a professional at what you're doing, and this person got stabbed or killed because of it, what kind of liability do you imagine comes along with that? So the Amok trainers instead are brought to a level of standard, and every one of them are able to achieve that at 100%, or they don't pass. But we get them there, which is why we have enough trainers, and they're doing well. If one of those trainers was ever brought to court, and they said to them, what kind of training did you get? Well, thank you for asking that. We have the world's most intensive program, and we have these standards. And then when they say, oh, well, what did you get? How did you pass on that standard? If you say you got a 98%, you're in trouble, because maybe that guy got hurt for the 2% you didn't learn.
Yeah.
Then you can say, well, thank you for asking that, because I passed that standard of excellence, which is the world's strictest, with 100%. So then they would have to put me up there and try to show that my program was flawed. Good luck with that. I've taught more knife than anyone else in the world.
There you go.
So
That's confidence.
What
right
we've
there.
done is we've established the proper standards for professionalism, and we make sure that people are able to meet those, and that can be validated and backed up. And with this now, they have professional licensing standards. Nobody else in the world offers that.
Now, how many branches is it? Well, you have other instructors that around the world, like you're a family. I don't want to, kind of compare you, but, talking about stick and knife, the Dog Brothers, they got the same kind of thing. They don't do exact, but they have branches all over the place that, focus just on their way.
Sure.
Their way.
Sure.
Which is a family, what you're talking about. I mean, do you have like gatherings? I don't. What do they call? What are the Amoks called?
Well, the thing is, we have it's run like a business. Okay.
Yeah.
This is our product. This is the licensing. This is our IP. And
How long has
this is what you
Amok
do
been? From when you started it? How long's it been going on?
Well, we had originally started in '92. We didn't do anything public till '94. So we've been in development all of those years.
Okay.
In the forward evolution. So.
A while.
Yeah, it's been a while. So, and then the thing about that is that when anybody comes into the Amok Trainers program, and we're working with them, and everything has to be functional, so we can prove it. If ever they believe that they have a technique or a drill or a better way of doing something, it is their duty to bring it up and show us right there on the spot. So if we can find out and go, hey, by the way, this worked better. And if so, we're going to take it right now, and we're all going to work it together. That will become the new standard, and then it'll go out that way. And we always give credit where credit's due, and we always move forward. And this is why Amok has had a forward evolution more than any other method, because we will take anything that works from anyone and build it in there. And this way,
it's all about functionality.
And not only that, but what that means is no Amok trainer ever has to be out in public and think, oh, well, I'm showing a move from this art, but I know that other thing works better, and then they're compromised in any way. And this way, every single trainer that comes in gets that same sense of being able to know that they can do it, and that they can.
It gives them the
gives them the confidence.
They can create something or make something better. Everything's always evolving. Like you said, you're getting better. People that your trainers are gonna evolve and tweak little things here and there.
Now, we have trainers that have had no martial experience whatsoever. We have some that have come from government or military backgrounds. We have people from security backgrounds. We have people from martial arts backgrounds. So we have people from a variety of different backgrounds that have come into Amok to become trainers. Right now, I think we have 35 trainers that are in the directory, and I think about another 21 or 22 that are in the training program. Some of them will be getting licensed soon enough.
Nice.
So that we're moving them through. But, you know, it takes time. They got to work that out. And when they get out, they're ready.
Now, it's, before I ask you a couple of questions and we wrap this up,
All right.
as far as when you do your Amok seminars, how frequent are they, and do you travel all over the country still, or do you like to focus more in the New England area so you don't have to travel so much? Like, what goes on? What's your kind of schedule with them?
I still travel.
Yeah.
I still do. So
Well,
you know.
I always interrupt, but when you talked about being a kid, that was one of the things you said to your mom. I want to see the world except for Russia. And I was like, he's probably got a house in Russia right now.
No, I don't. But I've been to 37 countries now. And I just absolutely love traveling. I just absolutely love it. And I still want to continue to see and do even more.
So you do your Amok seminars all around the world?
I've taught actually Amok in 25 countries now. And I'm sorry, 37 countries, but I've taught in 35.
Do you have certified trainers in other countries?
In a lot of different countries,
Awesome.
yeah. So we're pretty well spread out. Matt Persson is in Sweden, and he's kind of like the director of Europe because he's been with me the longest. And in Europe, we have another instructor in Spain, and then we have trainers. Trainers can teach privately, and they can teach in their own group, but they don't do public seminars.
Okay.
And only full instructors do public seminars. So Matt is a full instructor. We have instructors in Australia and there's a few countries around, and we got trainers spread out.
Are there videos on this too that you can look, or is this more private? The seminars are more private?
We don't have any videos taken at seminars.
Okay.
And that's why if you go on the website, up on the internet, you won't find any Amok videos.
Just pictures.
We just do pictures, okay. If people want to see Amok, then they can get the training videos. To me, if you want the training videos, that's what they're there for. And so anybody.
Oh, all right. That's what I meant. Like training videos and
Sure.
you said you had them to keep people fresh once they.
If they go to Amok.global, they'll go where it says videos. You go in there. It's like $5 a month or something. You click on it. It gives you access and it gives you all the core skills videos. And then they can select to choose focus courses if they want to. And then locally, I do a lot of seminars in New England. I do a lot of 2-hour seminars because a lot of the trainers in New England own martial arts schools.
Yeah.
And so I do seminars in their schools as well because I love to do them. And
there's a lot of older gym owners, like you said, Tim Gillette.
Oh yeah.
That came from the old school kind of stuff
Tim,
there, and you come in there like. It's like a treat.
I love
go
it.
in there.
I just love it. Tim Gillette.
That's a real martial arts school.
I want to say his name,
Tim
Tim Gillette. He hosted my first knife seminar ever. Okay, before anyone else, Tim said, that guy's going to do something. I'm going to bring him in. And we've become good friends since then. I want to have my first book signing at his school.
Awesome. Congratulations.
As some payback.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
All right, speaking of Tim, he's got a question.
Okay.
It's, he says, ask him about his live knife demos.
Oh, yeah, we used to do a lot of live blade, especially with Dan Nealon. Dan Nealon came with me like everywhere for the first 15 years, to 15 countries. We did everything. And we had a really good rapport. And live blade, random, he would give me striking attacks and coming in, and I would defend and pick them up and do it. And you know Sean Graham?
Yeah, real good.
Stabbed me right
He was saying something to you over here.
He stabbed me right in the hand. My thumb fell right off at a seminar once.
He was in here.
Right
he said, I think he called you on or something. He said, "Who's that guy?" or something like that. Yeah, where is he?
Sean has come with me to another 15
Who is that guy?
Around the world. Okay, Sean.
He's he's a hot shit, Sean.
He's the best, absolutely.
Awesome. So, what was that? All right, next question. So wait a minute. These knife, do you have videos of yourself doing knife demos and stuff like that? Or you
on the core skills we do, but
okay.
I don't have promotional
right.
videos and stuff that's out there. I don't.
Oh, Sean Graham's now. He's asking a question. You just woke the sleeping giant or the little giant. Ask him. Oh, he just mentioned to cut the finger off. He just said that, Sean.
Yeah.
The memories of Sean. Get my finger cut off. Someone's asking about the book. Luke Williams. Do you know Luke?
Oh yeah, right. Luke is our ninja guy from. He owns
There's always a ninja guy.
When I say ninja, like the TV.
Oh, he does the show.
Yeah, he won that damn thing. He's from Australia. Yeah, he's like great.
He's
so,
all right.
Hi, Luke.
Oh, that's a. All right, so he's asking about if you're going to be doing the Audible version. Will it be your voice?
Well, I don't know. That's something I was going to talk to you about, Steve, because I need a recording studio if I was going to do that. I need to find someone who has one. Maybe you know someone. So
an actual recording studio.
We'll talk about that later.
I think I can. I know musicians. I know someone that might be able to help you. I not right off the bat, but I can connect you with
just somebody who has a microphone, maybe. You know.
Oh, you're talking about me? You want to walk in there and you want to do that? We'll record.
So maybe so, because they've been asking me for the audio book, and so a lot of guys are asking me if I would do it instead of having somebody else do it.
Well,
so
I think that's a great idea.
We'll
we've been talking almost an hour and a half right now. I mean,
really?
Like, see how fast that goes? See how fast? When you're having fun, you're learning stuff. It's great. He hasn't learned anything from me
but
other than I stutter a little bit.
As Schubert would say, and furthermore.
Is that what he said?
About me.
The boy.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions here before a lot of truth in the book? There was probably other questions, but what you can do, Tom, is you can go back to the feed. If anyone asks a question, you have it. You can go back there and you can answer, reply to them or whatever, or tell Sean to shut up or whatever. So, Tom, we've gone an hour and a half, man. It's been a pleasure. As far as, are you on when did the book come out? When was it available? When did it go to Amazon? And you mentioned that you were having the book signing at Tim's, or when is this all happening?
Well, the book came out only about a week ago, so it's just
there's a lot to put together.
Yeah, and until the isolation thing is over, we won't really know.
We don't know anything right
now. But before we close out, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who came out to listen to this tonight, and I love all you guys, and I can't wait to get together with all of you when this isolation business is over. And thanks for checking in on us tonight.
Excellent. Well, just to let everyone know, if you don't have Facebook, this whole interview will be on YouTube tomorrow. It's on podcast stations. I don't know my guy that's putting up my website. He's doing all that, but I will post it all. I will send the links to you. You'll leave give me your email. I'll send you whatever links podcast so you can share these, or actually around the world.
Great.
Because some people don't have Facebook or they don't have video or YouTube, but they can listen to the podcast. So this will be everywhere. Which everyone will be able to get.
And look, you guys can get me on Facebook, or if you need my email, go to tomsotis.com, and you can always get my email there.
There you go. Tom, last things you want to say thank you to any. Oh, you said thank you, but is there anyone you want to say a special thank you to?
To you. So thank you for bringing me in here and let me yak at everybody here for 90 minutes.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It flows when you have a lot of interesting things to hear about and to talk about. I got to get you in here again. We got to talk further about this book. Actually, I'm going to read the book, and we'll have you on here, and we'll talk about what I got out of the book. And,
right on.
Maybe I can
field some more questions.
But I'd also... maybe down the line when you could show me a couple things.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We could do it right across the room right there. Just show me a
that
couple
would
of
be
things.
Fun.
You know what I mean? We
that
can do that down the line. We'll work that in there. We'll evolve the show. What's up? So that's all. You wanted to say thank you to me, and we're done.
Yeah.
Done with that.
Yeah. We're good to go.
There you go, Tom Sotis.
Thanks, everybody.
Book.
Yeah, get the book.
What is it called, Tom?
The Way of Tactics.
A manifesto.
A manifesto of invincibility.
By the way, I bought one off Amazon, and Tom was kind enough to bring the book to here before it came on, before it got shipped. You thought Amazon was going to ship it, which it came in pretty timely. So if you do order the book, you're going to get it really quick. But Tom, the book I got off Amazon because I'm going to keep the book that Tom gave me because it's an original. He's going to sign this book. And we're going to give it away, but we're not giving it away tonight. Tom's going to think of a question. He's going to relay it to me, and I'm going to post it, and whoever gets the question right first.
Whoever does it right, give us our name and I'll...
There you go. He writes the book to you. Write personally to your name. How's that sound?
Personal.
Awesome. So we'll talk about a contest or a question.
That's great.
That
I'll do it.
somebody could answer. You know, maybe they'll have to, we'll figure out something they'll have to really think about too. It's a valuable book, especially signed by this man. So Tom, I'd shake your hand, but we're in quarantine.
Right.
We want to do things right and buy the book here. He's actually 6 feet away right now too. There's a plastic bubble. He's not breathing the same air as me either. So with that said, Tom, a pleasure having you on. I learned a lot, and I just love talking too. But I love listening to when someone like you who's been seen it, been around the world, and has so many interesting things to say. You're like Disney World. I mean, you can't get enough in the first day.
Thanks,
I mean,
Steve.
you got to go again.
Look, it was an honor and it was a great pleasure, and I really look forward to doing it again.
Awesome. With that said, next week we'll be having 2 podcasts again. We'll have more fighters on, more interesting people talking about their stories and stories with fighters, coronavirus, all that, a scorpion. We can do it all. So thanks for listening. The Room Podcast. We'll be seeing you next Wednesday. Tom, thank you very much.
Take care.